Yep, thank you. So, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Thurrock for this meeting of the Association of South Essex Local Authorities, 28th of September at 10 o'clock. I thought what would be useful before we carry on, because this is the first time I've chaired this meeting, there's new leaders here as well, is if we actually go around and just do a quick introductory so that we all know who each other is. So, I'm Andrew Jeffries, I'm leader of Thurrock. If we go to my left.
Andrew Baggott, leader of Basildon.
Sorry, perhaps I should have said as well, to operate the microphones, if you press the button on the right-hand side and it goes red, just remember to turn it off so that the other person can speak.
Dave Smith, Chief Exec and Commissioner for Thurrock.
Louise McKinley, Deputy Leader, Essex County Council.
Tom Walker, Executive Director at Essex County Council.
Barry Aspinall, Leader of Brentwood Borough Council.
James Newport, Deputy Leader, Rochford District Council.
Jonathan Stevenson, Chief Exec at Brentwood Borough Council and Rochford District Council.
Ruth Gilbert, Director of Sustainable Growth, Essex County Council.
Liz Elbury, Head of Communications at Basildon Council.
Harry Palmer, Councillor for Castle Point Council, Cabinet Member for Economic Growth and Climate.
Angela Hutchings, Chief Executive, Castle Point Borough Council.
Liz Helm, Finance from Southend-on-Sea City Council.
Hello, I'm Kim Sawyer. I'm from Southend City Council, I should say, and I'm the Director of Legal Services there.
Tony Cox, Leader of Southend City Council.
And Scott Logan, Chief Exec of Basildon Borough Council.
Thank you, everyone. So, item 2, apologies for absence. We've received apologies from Councillor Blakewell and Councillor Palmer will be substituting. Apologies from Councillor Mason and Councillor Newport will be substituting. Are there any other apologies?
Councillor Bentley.
Oh, Councillor Bentley? Yeah, Councillor Bentley. Item 3, declaration of interest. Are there any declarations of interest to be made? No, thank you. Item 4, minutes of the previous meeting, which you'll find on pages 3 and 4. Councillor Newport.
Thank you, Chairman. Inaccuracy in those minutes. Councillor Bentley was in fact present at that meeting and Councillor Aspinall was not present. Thank you.
Apart from that, is everyone happy with the minutes? Yep, thank you. So item 5, ASELA, the next chapter including work streams update. Tom Walker.
Thank you, Chair. I'll give a brief overview of the cover paper, and there are 4 supporting annexes which cover some of the existing work streams being taken by the officers on the economic development agenda. So to give you the overview of the paper, first thing to say, this is about work that we would do regardless of where we progress on the devolution agenda. Since the papers were published, we are now making more progress towards a level 2 devolution deal, but even if we don't do devolution, this paper stands as a set of recommendations about economic development work across South Essex. I'll just give a brief summary, but I think you all know, and certainly as officers, we're committed to the huge economic development opportunity that exists right across South Essex, and the proposals in the paper about how we drive that forward and how we support it. The detailed annexes on the individual work streams give you an update on work that we've done focused on the quick wins and the here and now, and individual chiefs might update on those once I've done this summary. The core proposal here is that we now pool our resources and develop a sort of consolidation of all the strategic work that is going on and turn that into a forward-facing action plan. There are a set of detailed recommendations on page 6 of the pack, which I won't read through, but perhaps the key one is in outcome terms, in terms of what we're wanting to achieve, to develop the idea of the South Essex growth zone, and there's more about that in the economic strategy paper, And then in the resourcing paper, previous meetings of this have pointed towards bringing in an interim director, but we think the better option is to bring in some consultancy up to a level of 100K to support that work. Now, that's to give us the headroom to scope that out. We'll test it with you, and also crucially to bring it into alignment with what we now need to do on the devolution deal processes as we create, hopefully, the combined authority at level 2. There's a detailed summary of the underpinning strategy, the strengths of the economy, as I say, the 4 work streams which we can take updates on, and then a bit of context about the shifting landscape around us. There's a later paper on business engagement. All members know that the local enterprise partnership will be wound up. If we did nothing, there would be no economic development capacity or strategic leadership of economic development within the Greater Essex footprint. So we have to respond to the LEP agenda. And of course, the devolution conversation is very live. We'll be business facing, and we'll say more about that later, and of course work with partners like the Chambers of Commerce who've led on the local skills improvement plan. The detailed recommendation on resourcing is on page 8. That provides the rationale and the justification, and as officers we're completely committed to doing that in a very proportionate way. So this is not blue sky strategic thinking. This is about grounding what is already in existence in detailed actions, and the envelope we're asking for the resource for is the upper end, and we'll obviously approach that proportionately and test it with you as individual leaders as we develop it. Timing, we say about 6 months. I want to bring that into alignment with the work we're now doing on devolution and creating the combined authority, if you support that. And that's all I wanted to say really by the way of recommendations. The deliverables are set out in paragraph 4. I'll stop there. Scott and others may want to comment on the individual work streams or just give a summary on the work done to date, but very happy, Chair, to take questions on that basis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any member wishing to speak? No. Only thing to say for me is, you know, as a new leader in Thurrock, I'm really excited about the opportunities that we've got, particularly things like Freeport. And I think, Tom, you're quite right. Even with or despite devolution, this work has to continue, and we need to be in the best possible place to either take advantage of devolution or to continue this work. Thank you for your report. Sorry. So can I have agreement on the recommendations, please? Thank you.
Should we be putting hands up for it?
Yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah. So we're going through each of these now, aren't we? Yeah. So next one is Good Homes, Jonathan Stevenson.
Thank you, Chairman. With regard to the members, with regard to the paper you've got in front of you, is the Good Home Programme update. Obviously, some of you new members to ASELA, but obviously not new to the programme as organisations. But just the update on the paper. Last year, we gained £240,000 for strategic funding from our place partnership with Homes England. When this paper was written, it was written on the basis that and we didn't know our position with regard to a future combined authority. There will be some ongoing conversation with Homes England, because if there was an opportunity for us to move forward as a combined authority, that funding may be relooked at. But at the moment, in the present time, the end of this year, the revenue funding for the programme will run out. So the paper focuses on looking at how we can focus our resources on 3 key areas. One is the accelerated pipeline, which is a pipeline of a number of sites across all the 6 areas within South Essex. There's also the catalyst sites, which is a smaller list of longer-term sites, which include sites such as Dunton Hills, which has now been secured in Brentwood's local plan, and hopefully going forward for outline planning permission at the end of the year. And then also a new project that earlier this year we looked to review is looking at properties we've already got within our district boroughs and cities that haven't got the opportunity for sustainable energy. So looking at how we can work together to see if we can roll out a pilot of 6 streets within the 6 areas and see how we can work together with investment partners and local authority and housing association partners to get those properties to better positions with sustainability and quality as well. it was a key area for members looking at that we didn't want to just focus on new build homes, actually what we're doing for our residents within the ASELA area that already live in housing stock that may need improvements, whether it's green credential improvement or quality of living improvement. So that pilot project is actually going to be launched at a conference in October. And we're already working with investment partner Octopus Investments, looking at opportunities and a number of housing associations within South Essex as well. Further information will come forward to members, but more than happy to take any questions on the paper itself and the update.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any member wishing to comment? My only comment, and it's not like me to spot something, but the recommendation says ASELA Chief Executives. I think it should say ASELA Joint Committee. Yeah. So do I have agreement for the recommendations?
Yep.
Thank you. So next one, Environment and Climate Change, Angela Hutchins.
Thank you, Chair. Members, this work stream has brought together a collaboration of environmental experts from all authorities within the ASELA Joint Committee region. So working across South Essex to share best practice, to replicate without reinventing the wheel, and to devise and support cross-boundary projects which will assist not only the work of the Joint Committee but also individual authorities to meet their ambitions in relation to net zero and good green growth. So members, the recommendation is to allow officers to continue to meet to make that operational cost commitment to enable that community of experts to continue. The workstream also continues to look for the development of the Sea Park concept by exploring development opportunities for green funding and investment, working in particular with Thames Estuary Growth Board, and conversations relating to biodiversity net gain are continuing. The legacy has also now delivered and brought to conclusion the South Essex Culture and Creative Industry Strategy, and members, that will therefore now form part of the repository of information and data which will support the ambitions of this committee for growth.
Thank you, Angela. Any comments from any members?
Yeah, thank you. I don't like ambushing officers or anything like that. So my understanding with Sea Park was that we had reached the point where it had passed the proof of concept. We'd accepted that from a local government point of view, the project itself was better off going out to private funding or looking for private initiatives that were willing to take it on. Can I just clarify where we are with that? Is that still proceeding, or are we still flogging the dead horse of Sea Park?
So the Sea Park project has got to a place where no further work is being undertaken on the documentation itself. The issue becomes a question now of how it is brought to life and how it is implemented. So that is not something that can be funded from entirely within the public purse. And so by exploring those green opportunities for private investment funding through green infrastructure, through green bonds and biodiversity net gain, creating Sea Park as an investable proposition for private equity and private sector funding is exactly what I'm exploring with Thames Estuary Growth Board now.
Thank you. And again, I know I've said this before, but it behooves it as it's a new committee. The concern with Sea Park is, of course, when it is up and running, when the project starts to develop, is where the cost goes and what cost there is that falls on the relative local authorities with regards to upkeep, with regard to the issues of how you control crime or potential antisocial behaviour in the area, how you actually manage and garden it and everything else. So at some point, whatever happens and manifests, I think it's going to be very, very important that all the members know what financial commitment might fall upon each authority that it falls within.
Thank you, Councillor Baggott. You're absolutely right. But with less than 7% of the land comprised within Sea Park being in public ownership, it will not necessarily always fall to the public sector to pick up the tab. Part of looking for green investment is looking for a stewardship model which includes not just the upfront capital investment to make the project work, but also the ongoing maintenance and support of that. And that's why the 30-year covenant for biodiversity net gain is so important to explore as a means of funding a longer-term perspective for Sea Park.
Thank you. I knew you'd have the answers.
Thank you. Perhaps I could say something for Councillor Bagger. I don't think I'm jumping the gun. I hope I'm not. I hope they don't mind. But certainly here in Thurrock, we'd be looking to the Thames Freeport to, join with us on something like Sea Parks. I think that's something they would be. But we need to talk to them about that first. Any other member wishing to speak? So, do I have agreement on the recommendations? Agreed. Thank you. Next item is sustainable transport. You haven't got by Tom Walker, you haven't got a written report, but I believe it's going to be a verbal report.
Yeah, I'll be very brief, Chair. We haven't got a written report. There's a lot of work going on across the South and the 3 upper tier authorities on local transport plan 4. That's tied in with discussions we're having with Department of Transport on prospective devolution deal text. And there isn't a sort of easy win or reportable deliverable right now, but we'll bring a fuller report in the future. So it is a very brief update, but the officers across all 3 authorities working together on local transport plan 4.
Thank you. I look forward to the report. Yes, Councillor Aspinall.
Yeah, so the strategic planning authorities bring forward their local transport plans for their geographies, and across Essex, the 3 upper tier authorities are working together. It basically sets out the strategic aims for the transport system across Essex, the detailed projects that follow on, and it's part of the DFT Department of Transport arrangements and engagement. So it's a pre-existing piece of process which we do periodically to set the priorities for Greater Essex.
So that I'm clear, Chair, because I'll be primed on this when I get back. It's the upper tier authorities, Southend, Thurrock and Essex, who's dealing with this.
Yeah.
So where do we come in
to
this process?
Yeah, the formal strategic transport responsibility sits with the upper tier authorities, and obviously within the county we are engaged with district officers, but essentially it's the strategic transport network that we provide. And I'd be very happy to give a quick written update, Chair, if you want just something to share with district backbenchers and Cabinet on how that's progressing and the timetable and when you'll get that formal engagement. So happy to do that as a follow-up action on the meeting.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other member wishing to speak? Okay, so we move on to economy, skills and jobs. Scott Logan.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to that last item for the Council, obviously your head of planning would feed in through ECC highways, part of your planning needs over the next 15 years, part of your local plan. So certainly ours, I know, would work very closely with the ECC officers. So on this report, this report, Chair, if I may, bear with me because it's quite a broad programme itself, and we have 4 themes, and particularly want to highlight, I know it's in the first report, around the skills programme, and with a devolution level 2, quite clearly there will be a real additional funds and responsibilities around adults' skills. So I'm very pleased to say that we've been working collectively with all of the economic development officers for some time on skills, and I'm very pleased to say that Coventry University, I think I said last time, have started their work this September with seats and with the Ford employees, over 90 employees, and the other businesses are following on with that. So it'll be really good to probably at a future meeting bring Coventry University to here just to talk about their experience in working within South Essex. A real coup for having a university presence in South Essex. And indeed, I'm meeting with Southend Airport next week about how they move forward with their challenges around recruitment of some of their engineers and bring into that programme of degree apprenticeship. So in the seats model, I'm pleased to say as well, the funding from Thames Freeport should be, because I confirmed it yesterday, arriving, so they will be self-funding. We can then recruit members of staff that then go on and then bring the next set of businesses and their needs forward. And I think that was something that Ruth, who's here as our skills lead from Essex and supports me on this programme, said, what Seats is a brokerage. So what it does do, it engages with business and actually provides the right provider for their next factory of jobs. Very unique and very innovative for this part of the country. So, and what we're then doing as part of that programme is what's the next stage? And I'm sure if there's any questions on skills, Ruth will be able to say, well, where we go next, not only with seats, but the wider skills programme, because it's not just the level 7 degree apprentices, there's a level 3, 4 and 5, and we will work with partners such as South Essex College and the IoT to make sure we're joined up. And that's what we're about. And indeed, we had a meeting with the Essex Chambers of Commerce that looking at the local skills improvement plan to make sure we've got a credible plan for South Essex to feed into that devolution deal. So that's the first part of the programme. The one close to your heart is Thames Freeport. Quite clearly, you know, there is some exciting opportunities. I'm sure they will be announcing shortly. And indeed, I've spoken to the Chief Exec around us inviting members here for a tour of Freeport to really get to see what Freeport is, which I've had the opportunity of seeing before, and to see where some of that growth will come from in the 21,000 jobs and how we are key to part of helping them deliver that ambition. And I know that they're just about to secure several hundreds of £1 million of funding for Freeport. And I'm sure Councillor Jeffries, you'll be able to tell us more of that as it goes along. So Thames Freeport, led by the Economic Development Officer of Thurrock, in a work stream of how we can all get the benefits and support the growth of the Thames Freeport programme. Business support, and I know there's a paper that Tom will talk about a second. Business support has been a challenge, and way back, members here of this committee made a decision they wanted to look at a different way of working with businesses, and we're asking for you today to formally to commit in the next paper around that direction of travel. And what I'm pleased to say is Southend Borough Council lead on this, are looking at how we best engage with business. What is that new way of working? The business group we want to work with in partnership to deliver our ambitions of South Essex. So part of that will be, you know, how does that work then with the devolution deal? How does that work with the LEPs? And how do we want to interact with businesses? There was from members previously, there was comments around, well, actually, the OSC is over here and we wanted to be working together in partnership. So what Southend are doing is actually engaging with businesses, including OSC partners, about how we want to interact. What's important to them, because sometimes what we talk about isn't important to them. So it's a real true partnership, and we will be coming back, as I say, in the next paper of recommendations of what we see as a new business relationship at this level of a sub-regional from Greater Essex. The next programme, sector development, which is again looking at what other sectors that we want to promote as economic development teams jointly together to build growth. Because, in my opinion, I've been quite passionate about this. You know, 7 places doing it individually doesn't work. Frustrating for businesses. We need to be aligned. We haven't got the money and the resources to do it separately anyway. So we should be looking at that joined up shared services, which was the direction of travel we're heading in. And lastly, again, inward investment, place promotion, which is, again, jointly led by Basden and Essex County Council. Where are we looking to, and picking up with the comms and branding later on report, where are we working together on that inward investment, the proposition, whether we go to UK Reef as a joined up team, whether we then actually do, you know, what we used to call is, you know, trips or visits to places where we want to be interested in investing in South Essex. And maybe we do that partly with places like Thames Estuary Growth Board and the Freeport, because actually we are open for growth in South Essex. So really I would say, Chair, there's good progress, and I think whilst we recognise and we've recommended that we review where we are with devolution, etc., there's still some really good work going on at South Essex that will continue whatever happens as part of the devolution deal.
Thank you, Scott. Any member wishing to comment? Councillor Cox.
Yeah, just very briefly, I know Scott touched upon it, but Scott's really touched upon the growth strategy that we're taking through at Southend. So I think we've got a piece of work to make sure it aligns with what we're doing, but also some of the things that we're doing can maybe use as best practice right across the region that we're looking at as well. But I just really wanted to just feed that in, Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? Just an aside, apprenticeships for me are really close to home, and I think they're so vitally important, so I'm absolutely delighted. And I probably should have made a declaration of interest. My nephew has just completed his degree apprenticeship at Coventry University, and he got a first, so I'm going to get that in as well. So absolutely delighted to see that Coventry University are joining us, and I look forward to welcoming more and more apprenticeships on those courses. Do I have agreement on the recommendations on the report, please? Thank you very much. Next item, item 6, future South Essex business engagement arrangements. Scott, that's over to you.
Is actually Tom doing that one?
Oh, sorry, apologies.
No, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I'll again give a brief summary. It follows on from what Scott has just said and what I said in the earlier report. The paper really does two things. So it sets the context for the future work as the LEP comes to the end, and then there are some operational decisions we're looking for your agreement on winding up the current arrangements. Just to remind you of the context, the South East Local Enterprise Partnership obviously covers a huge area, including Kent and including East Sussex. The government is winding up the local enterprise partnerships and ending the funding in March 24. That gives us the opportunity for Greater Essex and in the South to set up new business arrangements, as Scott has said, and we've talked about that at previous committees, and this is really an update to that effect. So we have the certainty of the LEP picture. We're progressing now towards devolution, and we need to take action in the South. So there are 4 recommendations which I think are fairly explanatory. The first is important to put on record and acknowledge the work that Opportunity South Essex have done over the years, and to thank them for that, including the business members who have fed in. The second is that Scott and I will work with officers across all authorities on firm proposals then for business engagement in the South and how that complements anything that we do at the Greater Essex level. And then there are 2 recommendations which really flow from detailed work that Angela at Castle Point has done and may want to add to this, but to seek formal approval to essentially terminate the existing arrangements and withdraw the funding. We've considered a couple of options there which are set out at 3.2 in the report, whether it was possible to withdraw funding immediately or at the end of the financial year. Our advice is we do it at the end of the financial year because that enables us to wind things up in an orderly way. There's a bit more detail on the sorts of issues that we need to consider, and I think the thing I would stress, and I've been talking to people like the Chambers of Commerce, is that we need arrangements that work for business, not just for us as council officers. So I hope you'll agree the recommendations. Happy to answer questions, and Angela, if you want to add to anything I've said on the formalities, please do.
Thank you. Councillor McKinley.
Thank you. I just wanted to draw out the points which I think a number of people have touched on here, which is the role of business in this. I know we talk about partnership working, but the businesses absolutely have to be at the forefront of this and have to be driving it. We will very quickly get back into the conversations that we think we need to have, and I know you made this point, Scott, around being relevant to the businesses, but if we really are going to keep them on board, it has to be about what's driving them. And I would just push for them to be at the front of that as much as is feasibly possible.
Thank you. You're reading my notes because that's exactly what, well, more or less what I put down on here as well. I said I agree. It's entirely, it should be about what businesses want, not necessarily what we want. So I look forward to us getting those arrangements in place. Any other member wishing to speak? No. Happy to go to recommendations. Do I have agreement? Thank you.
Thank you. That's all right. Thank you, Chair. There are 3 recommendations included in the report for members to consider. But just to summarise, this is a proposal to rename the Joint Committee to South Essex Councils. This would bring the organisation in line with very similar organisations across the country. As members will be aware and lead officers, a decision was made at the last Joint Committee to update the logo, and again, bringing the name forward would bring that all aligned. Included in the paper is a proposal to bring forward a detailed communication strategy to be considered at the next Joint Committee, and the development of an overarching ASELA narrative, again to be considered at the next Joint Committee. Basildon, as the lead authority for communications, would take the lead in coordinating that across the members of the Joint Committee and pushing that forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott.
Yeah, just to add, leader, and before my leader probably does say it, I know members have been probably frustrated, and every time I speak to one of the leaders, they say to me, well, actually, particularly new leaders, I don't actually know what South Essex Council, is that what it's called, does. How are we getting the message of what, in Seat's example out there? I think we have struggled with that. So it was agreed last time, and we've now got all of the comms leads together now as a collective group. I think what we are asking is, for one, to come back with a clear brand and a vision, and actually probably might need some resources to getting the messaging out there, because we are open for business, and I think we've struggled as a collective to get that message. So I think there will be an ask of funding for this programme moving forward to actually, so we can bang the drum around where South Essex is, because we have got lots of competing places for funding, whether that's in the private or public sector. So I just reflect on, I think this piece of work is quite critical moving forward to deliver our ambitions, and whether that is part of a devolution deal or for South Essex in partnership with the Thames Estuary Growth Board or with Thames Freeport, we do need to bang a drum better than we currently are.
Councillor Cox.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. My views are, yes, we do need to better explain within the constituent councils what ASELA does, but equally, I am mindful that, yes, there may be some resources attached to it, but they need to be kept to a minimum, because this is essentially a rebrand. And with all what we've going on in our constituent councils, I'm sorry, I'm going to find it very difficult to actually sell thousands upon thousands of pounds on what's only an internal rebrand. And I think we need to be mindful of that. We really do. It's got to be done efficiently, expediently, with minimum fuss and with minimum cost exposures as well.
Thank you. Councillor Newport.
Thank you, Chair. Just referring to item point 7.2 on the communication strategy, will a budget proposal come forward with that communication strategy? Because lots of members are mentioning the fact that not many people know what ASELA does, and it's pretty pitiful what we see in front of us. I think if we're trying to connect with businesses, 550 followers on LinkedIn isn't a good metric to be working to. So I'd be interested to know what sort of budget is going to be put into this communication strategy. Thank you.
Scott, would you like to answer?
Yeah, I come back. I mean, I can answer both the points are relevant, really. I mean, you'll see in the next report there is a budget that we put in. We will not be going over the existing budget of ASELA or South Essex Councils. Apologies, because you've made that decision, so I'll have to get used to that. But not yet. Sorry, apologies. If that is your decision, the reality, we've got a set budget. I think that there's rightly criticism, and you can see from the stats we need to rethink what we do in terms of get that messages jointly. And we have got joint resources, so most of it will come from within the existing resources. But we as councils then will need to make sure our teams do focus on that rather than looking for lots of bringing expensive consultants in. I'm just saying it's more when we might want to be going to events to get the message across is where some of that funding might be needed, rather than our own team should be doing the rebranding. I completely agree. We're not asking a company to come and rebrand it. That is and equally, I'm asking chiefs and senior officers to actually disseminate this down the organisation, and you as leaders disseminate it across your members, because there's a good news story here in here. We just actually got to crack it, which is why I'm asking the comms team to come back with that.
Thank you, Scott. Councillor Baggott.
Thanks. I mean, first of all, I totally agree with Councillor Cox. I mean, I think that the one thing that irks the public in general is when you see private company X that decides to rebrand, spend hundreds of thousands of pounds rebranding to form itself into company Y, and it makes no difference whatsoever. And, there's always commentary from people as to what a waste of money that is, and we need to be very mindful of that because it's public purse. When Councillor Bentley first said that, he thought that ASELA didn't really say what he said on the tin, I had a lot of sympathy and empathy for that, and I agree with it. And I'm going to be contrarian. While we've got South Essex Councils, I just think to an extent that doesn't go far enough. I think that you'd say, okay, South Essex Councils, but what's that about? What does that mean? If it was South Essex Councils working together, it says what it is on the tin. It is South Essex Councils working together. So I do think that as part of the rebrand and the refresh, there needs to be that statement or mission statement so that the public can see exactly what it says on the tin. Because I just don't think we've gone far enough within the rebrand. That's just my view.
Thank you. Yeah, sure, Councillor Cox.
I think on that, I think there's the strapline underneath the logo. And I'm quite happy for that to be included. As you say, it does what it says on the tin. A bit like fine teak in that respect, does what it says on the tin. As long as it's incorporated, I don't think anyone would have a problem.
Yep, I agree, and that's just what we were saying. The strapline underneath the logo, definitely. Councillor McKinley.
Thank you. I won't add to the critiquing of exactly how we phrase it now, but I do think it exemplifies the fact that there is a need to do this. And you know, you're absolutely right around some of those stats there. They're nothing to write home about, having 67 followers on Twitter. But I think we are at a point now, not only with the devolution stuff that's happening, but also the updates that we've just had, that it is important that we do brand ourselves in a way that is, you know, A, understandable to people, both in terms of the public, but also the partners and the businesses that we're working with, but that can also start to then be used for us to then come up with straplines, come up with slogans, come up with how we then present SEC. And I don't think any of us want to turn this into some hundreds of £1,000s project in terms of what we call ourselves. But branding is really important in this, and because it sets that position around how we then communicate. So I think this is really timely. I think we're starting to see, as I say, without sort of opening that up too much, some of the conversations that will need to be had at the right time in the right forum. But on the basis of where we are at collectively and in terms of opportunities, as I say, with Devo and everything else, I think this is really timely. I think SEC, you know, it's simple, isn't it? And then we can have conversations around what else the spin-offs are in terms of straplines and, you know, emblems and slogans, whatever else that may mean. But it's a good time to do this now. Thank you.
Thank you. And I couldn't agree more. And when I first read this, I did actually go onto Twitter and try and locate us, and I couldn't find anything about it. So I think there is a lot of work to be done on that. If no other member wishes to speak, do I have agreement on the recommendations? Thank you very much. Item 8, finance update. Elizabeth.
Thank you. So the report sets out the financial position that we ended 22-23 in, which was a £206,000 surplus. That was planned to mitigate our brought forward deficit from 21-22, bringing our reserve to a £32,000 surplus. That was earmarked specifically for the Pinsent Masons work going on. This year, you will see that we are forecasting a £263,000 underspend. That's because obviously we're working up new plans for the future. The position does include all of the existing programmes that are ongoing, so the housing work with Homes England. There's also the £100,000 referenced earlier for consultancy. Just to note, there is a small budget included in there for communications, so the support to the website. It's around £5,000, and we'll keep that under review as to how much that does cost towards the end of the year. And if it looks like it's going to be significant, which it doesn't sound like it's going to, as officers support that within existing remits, that will be brought back. There is a forecast surplus this year, but that will help us with the future plans as they get developed.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Any member wishing to comment? No? Okay, so I'll go to the recommendations. Do I have agreement for the recommendations?
Yep.
Thank you very much. That's the end of the formal agenda. Has any member got anything they would like? Oh, sorry, Councillor Baggett.
It's not really in my nature to be contentious, so I shall try and continue to keep in that role. Rah-rah, the good ship devolution has started to sail, and I know some people are excited about it. Basildon has always been a little bit sceptical, and we've always said that the key things around the devolution argument is how much sovereignty is maintained by borough councils, and also ultimately what the governance arrangements are for any new arrangement coming in. What I'm concerned about, to an extent, is when you look at the agenda today, we've talked about skills, we've talked about transport infrastructure, we've talked about housing, we've talked about jobs, we've talked about the economy. And all of those, to an extent, are forming part of the package that is being put forward under the devolution agreement and the lobbying. What would be a tragedy is if we spend huge amounts of officer time, officer work, our own work and everything else, and then find that it's not being locked in, and whatever new form of devolution takes place, they're doing something completely different or working at odds with what we're doing. So I think that what we should be doing or working towards is how we lock in the reports and the work done to actually ensure that that is carried over to any future arrangements. Otherwise, we are effectively just talking here and wasting our time.
Councillor Cox.
Thanks, Andrew. I completely agree. But also as well, I think we should be mindful when we look in at the governance arrangements around what the new devolution framework may be. I still think there is a role for this body, even if it's in an advisory capacity, to look into potentially what because as you say, all what's on the agenda will be tied in as part of that level 2. But I still see a role for this, even if it does act as an advisory body to do it. And I think that's how you'll get the tie-in. But I know there's further work to be done, but that's my strong initial views at this stage.
Yeah, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, just to pick up on the question and the comment, I mean, I agree. There's a practical thing. It's the same officers doing the same work, and actually part of our job, and what I said right at the outset, is we do exactly as you said, which is to lock in progress made and then pull down whatever the government puts on the table. So, for example, in skills, we, i.e. you as members, will have control of the adult skills budget, and that will supplement everything that we've done on skills to date. It will make it easier. There are obviously some choices for members, leaders, I should say, on the governance arrangements that underpin any combined authority. There's good joint work going on that. I think you're aware of the broad shape, but there's obviously a formal sign-off moment. And my view as an officer is that we'll have strong arrangements in the south and strong arrangements in the north, which will feed into a combined authority. You've obviously got to consider those options. Kim and I and other senior officers are working on them, but I think it's in the spirit of exactly what you say. My final reflection is that other parts of the country are making that step forward, and the very worst thing, in my view, would be that Essex and Greater Essex is left behind as places like Lancashire, as places like Devon, Torbay and Plymouth put in similar arrangements. So we need to bring you those proposals properly. We've worked at the upper tier level and with every single district all the way along, and I think we'll continue to do that. So just hopefully to give you a bit of assurance.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor Aspinall.
Yes, thank you. I totally agree with the last three speakers. We need to get an idea first of what devolution actually means to us and where the monies are going to go and where monies are going to come from. If there's officer support needed for the combined authorities, where's that money coming from? Who's going to supply that? There's lots of unanswered questions here, so we're just, at the moment, it feels like we're just in a fog or walking in the dark, wondering where it's going to happen, if it's going to happen, how much of it is going to happen, is there going to be a tweak to it before it's rolled out? Governments of all colours are notorious for changing their minds or changing direction, and who knows where this comes. So there may be a role for us going forward, but if there's a combined authority and then there's the three-tier authorities in Essex, and then there's the ASELAs and the whatever the North one's called, it's a lot of decisions, boards in place. And then there's the leaders of Essex meetings. There's an awful lot of different meetings at different levels with different people making decisions, and to me there needs to be a stronger framework before I'm enthused about this. Just a comment, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor. I mean, if I can say, as one of the signatures to the letter that went to the Secretary of State to say that we're interested in that, Tony will correct me if I'm wrong, and so will Louise, but I think all three of us were committed to taking this a step further and getting that detail that you're talking about. Once we've got that detail, then bringing it back and making sure that, you know, all levels of local authorities get a say, get an input, and we make sure that the deal we get is right for the whole of Essex. So all that detail should be ironed out before we take it any further. And I think, I'm looking at my two colleagues, I think they'd probably agree with that. So that was really, really important. And I know that Councillor Bentley was, when we were talking, was keen to get back to the boroughs and the districts and make sure that you were fully informed of what was actually happening. Councillor McKinley.
Yeah, thank you. I think you're spot on there, and maybe just to add the political voice to what Tom was just saying. You know, this for me has always been around how we get much better outcomes for people and businesses and economic growth within the whole county of Essex. Of course, there will be conversations around governance, what that looks like, what that means. I think we have to be careful we don't get too hung up on governance. We need to make sure that the wheels can move and we actually see those outcomes. But that is a conversation for another day. But you know, I do take the point that there are a lot of structures, aren't there, across the whole of the county. And I think as part of this, there is an opportunity for us to look at what that means, how many meetings we're attending, who's there, when is it a decision, when is it a suggestion, when is it advisory, etc., etc. Certainly from my point of view, and I'll say this on behalf of the County Council, as you know, we have been very, very keen and very clear all the way along to involve and work with the districts, not just as an FYI basis, but for it to be proper partnership working. And I think you're absolutely right. It's not just about the individual organisations, it's actually about forums like this as well, that we make sure that we are, you know, feeding that into whatever structure we ultimately have when it comes to governance. It has to have, yeah, it has to have. And of course, there's the role of business and the other stuff that we've spoken about today as well. So I think it is timely, and I think, you know, Barry does make a good point there around the number of meetings and the different structures, but all of that, for me, feels like it can be part of this broader conversation. And I do think that as we move through this, we have to make sure that we are, you know, working collectively. That is how we're going to get the better proposals, the better suggestions, and that we do also think, as I say, about those outcomes. We shouldn't forget that. I know we all say, yes, we do, and we nod and agree, but as the conversations go forward, you know, it is about leaving some of that baggage at the door as well, I think, in terms of how we operate, so we can get much better outcomes and impacts for the people and businesses across the county.
Thank you, Councillor McKinley. And if anything can come out of devolution, perhaps the number of meetings that we have can be reduced, and for them to be a lot more productive. Any other member wishing to speak before I formally close the meeting? No? So formally close the meeting at 10:49. Thank you, everybody.